Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'll get back to your phone calls and emails shortly, and we have a lot of issues to talk about tonight. One of them, and I told you that this is going to be an ongoing refrain. The mainstream media will declare that Donald Trump doesn't know anything about X. And then you'll see Donald Trump take actions, and you'll see him act on X, and then you'll see him succeed. And then the mainstream media will move on to the next subject. For the subjects already covered, Donald Trump knows nothing about negotiating with North Korea. Well, it appears that he's made more movement in the North Korea problem than America's made in a quarter of a century. They'll say he doesn't know anything about negotiating trade with China. And China, it seems, is already starting to make some corrections. Now, will we get everything we want? You never do in a business deal, but you want to get some of what you want and not end up always on the short end of the stick. Trump is about fixing that as well. And for all the naysayers in the mainstream media at MSNBC and CNN and the Washington Post and the New York Times, it appears that this president knows a whole lot more about negotiating and about diplomacy and about trade than anybody ever thought he did. Well, except for those of us smart enough to endorse and vote for Donald Trump. Frank Gaffney joins me now, founder and president of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. Frank, good to have you back. And what is the Donald Trump way to neutralize Iran in its nuclear ambitions?
It was laid out by Mike Pompeo yesterday at the Heritage Foundation, Lars, and I had the privilege of being in the room when he did it. It was, my way of thinking, one of the most important speeches, well, in my memory, for sure, and I would argue in this century, because it talked through what is really going on with Iran, the threats that it poses to us, the dangers that it represents to our interests and others in its own region, and the extent to which there really has to be a change in any number of respects, not just with respect to the nuclear weapons program, if the threat that's posed by that regime is to be attenuated. And what Mike Pompeo laid out were 12 very important changes that we have to see. And he said, you know, if we don't see them, it's going to be sanctions for you, Iran, and sanctions for anybody who tries to do business with you in, you know, violation of the sanctions that we're laying out now. It's incredibly courageous and I think absolutely necessary course correction, certainly from the Obama bomb nightmare.
Well, I think it's terrific to see a president has the spine to stand up and do this. What I keep hoping, and maybe I'm being too optimistic about this, but I keep hoping that some of our European allies and others will realize that this is the direction to go, and they'll come around. But at this point, so far, they have not, have they?
Well, they're trying very hard not to, Lars, but I think what is beginning to sink in is, at least with respect to their biggest companies who do business with the United States, those companies are signaling that they get it when we're saying through our sanctions and through secondary sanctions that would hit them if they violate our sanctions, you have a choice. You can do business with the Iranians or you can do business with the United States. And these big companies, Total comes to mind as a prime example, a big French oil conglomerate. They've said, you know, we're winding down our operations in Iran. This is not going to be a good plan for us to try to, you know, defy the United States. And I think that's going to happen more and more. And as it does, I believe it's going to begin affecting the kind of behavior that we're seeing from the Europeans themselves.
Why do they want so badly to facilitate Iran doing what they're doing instead of pushing back the other? Because if you said, well, they just don't see a way to bring enough pressure to bear, clearly if the whole world or most of the world says we're not going to do business with you, the pressure will be brought to bear. But it's almost as though the Europeans want the Iranians to become nuclear armed, because otherwise, why wouldn't you grab any opportunity to push back the other direction?
Lars, I think it comes down to two things. Most of the Europeans have become so completely accustomed to the act of appeasing bullies that if that's an option, they default to it. If it's not an option, they won't, but they will if it's left up to them. And the bigger problem is that they're greedy. They're determined to do business even with people who are equally determined to kill them. And, the effect of that is to enable and to intensify the kind of danger that is posed to not just them, but all of us as well.
Frank, I got to tell you something. You would think that the liberals and the Democrats would appreciate this kind of approach for this reason. Call it my California theory. California wants to have a lot tighter controls on air quality, in part because they have some peculiar air quality problems in the Los Angeles basin. So they can't get the Congress to adopt the kind of rules they want them to adopt. So they just say, well, if the car companies want to sell to us, you have to come up to our state standards. Now, they're allowed to do that because the states are 50 little laboratories of democracy. I don't have to like the outcome of it to appreciate the approach. If the United States is saying to Iran, we're not going to do business with you, and anybody who does isn't going to do business with us. In effect, the United States can say, we're the big player on the globe. We're the biggest market you'd like to be selling goods into. Would you like to do business with Iran alone, or would you like to do business with the United States? But it can't be both. It's the same tactic, except brought to the world stage.
It is, and it's a sensible tactic, and I think it's proven in the past to be a better way to go. Look, we're not talking about a permanent prohibition on companies in Europe, or for that matter anywhere else, doing business with Iran, making money in Iran. We're talking about waiting until there is a climate in Iran in which it is safe to do so. It is safe for them to do it. It is safe for them to be putting money into these companies in Iran, or the government of Iran for that matter. Primarily, it's, by the way, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps that they're putting the money into, Lars. So This is a bad bit of business all the way around, and they shouldn't do it.
Well, you would think. Let me make another comparison, Frank, that may fit, and you tell me if it doesn't. You recall when there was a big to-do during the Obama administration over bathroom rules and whether or not men who imagine that they are women could use the ladies' room. And there were a couple of states that got themselves sideways with what I thought was a really sensible position. I thought the states were right to say men's room are for men, women's are for women. But big American companies said, we're not even going to do business in your state because of your bathroom rules. But some of the same folks behind those big companies support the idea that the United States should not use that same tactic of saying, you want to do business in a state where you realize that you're creating profits that are being used to fund terrorism and to fund the Iranian Guard? If you're doing that, we don't want to be involved in it. I think that's sensible as well. As you said, if you're doing it, you're helping to aid and abet financially the operation of a giant terror-sponsoring nation. Frank, I appreciate you coming on, and we always appreciate your insights into things. Thanks for the time.
My pleasure as always. Thank you.
That's Frank Gaffney, the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy.